Texas, 1944. The morning sun had just begun to rise when a line of trucks came to a stop outside Amarillo. Engines rumbled, coughed, and went silent, leaving only the faint buzz of insects and the soft wind through the trees. Inside one of the trucks sat a group of German prisoners, not soldiers, but women. Their uniforms were wrinkled, their faces pale from weeks of travel across land and sea. Among them was 24-year-old Lisa Latte Minart, once a Luftwaffe radio operator captured near Cherbourg. She had imagined America as a place of steel and fire, a nation that broke its enemies. Every rumor from home had warned her that German prisoners would be beaten, mocked, or forced to dig graves under the burning desert sun. When the truck doors opened, she tensed, expecting yelling or the strike of a rifle. Instead, a calm voice spoke. "Ma'am, watch your step." Standing before her was a man in a tan hat, sleeves rolled up, dust on his boots. He didn't look like a soldier, more like a cowboy from the old Western films she had seen before the war. Behind him, the Texas sky stretched endlessly blue. The air smelled of hay and horses, not smoke or gunpowder. Around her, the other women climbed down carefully, holding their small bags close. There were no chains, no shouting, only a few relaxed guards nearby, watching quietly. The cowboy offered her a tin cup of water. It was cool and clean, cleaner than anything she'd tasted since France. She drank it in one gulp. "There's plenty more where that came from," he said with a nod. Lisa didn't know how to respond. Back home, she had been told Americans were violent, greedy people, ruled by machines and money. But here, in the warmth of a Texas morning, the world looked nothing like those stories. Beyond the fences, cattle wandered slowly. Windmills turned in the distance. A dog barked somewhere near the stables. The cowboy gestured ahead. "You'll be helping out here, feeding, cleaning, maybe even riding if you like." Riding, she thought, almost laughing. She had prepared herself for chains, not horses. As the camp gates closed behind her, she turned back toward the open plains. For the first time since her capture, she felt something unexpected, curiosity. This is America," she whispered softly. The narrator's voice faded in. Lisa had been taught to fear a monster. Instead, she found a nation so sure of itself that it didn't need to hate its enemies, a place that gave prisoners saddles instead of shackles. Before arriving, she had believed she would die in America. Everyone she knew thought the same. In Germany, propaganda posters had warned that captured soldiers would be tortured or starved. Radio programs described the United States as corrupt, a land where honor was replaced by greed. For women like Lisa, the fear ran deeper. Rumors spread among the Luftwaffe auxiliaries that female prisoners were sent to brutal camps or worse. These stories were told in whispers, printed in pamphlets, and repeated until they felt real, all painting America as a cruel empire hiding behind machines and lies. That fear followed her across the ocean and across the endless American railroads. Yet, when the doors opened in Texas, none of it came true. The guards offered food. They said please and thank you. It felt strange, almost like a trick. But it wasn't. The United States had something the Reich never understood: confidence built on principle. By 1944, America held more than 400,000 Axis prisoners across its land. But rather than punish them, the U.S. military followed the Geneva Convention strictly. Prisoners earned small wages, wrote letters home, attended church, and even learned English in classroom tents. It was a kind of strength that didn't need cruelty. In Texas, where the land stretched farther than anyone could see, captured Germans were sent to work on farms and ranches instead of being locked behind fences. The reason wasn't emotional, it was practical. With so many American men fighting overseas, someone had to plant crops, tend cattle, and harvest cotton. These prisoners filled that gap. But to Lisa Latte and the other women, this practicality felt like something deeper: compassion. That first night, Lisa sat on her bunk staring at the plate before her. Beef stew, warm bread, butter, even a slice of apple pie. Food she didn't believe she deserved. She hesitated to eat. Another woman whispered that it might be poisoned. But by morning, hunger won. They ate, and in that moment, realized something extraordinary. The people they were told to hate were feeding them better than their own army ever had. In one of her first sent letters home, Lisa wrote, asterisk, "They told us we would be slaves. But here, even the guards say good morning. The sky feels endless, and the food tastes like mercy." Asterisk, for women raised under dictatorship, the biggest shock wasn't comfort, it was dignity. America didn't need to crush or humiliate its prisoners to show its power. That quiet confidence began to challenge everything they had believed about the war. By the spring of 1944, America had become the world's largest keeper of prisoners. Over 400,000 Axis captives spread across the country. Texas alone held more than 70 major camps, built quickly across its plains from El Paso to Huntsville. Each camp looked nearly the same, rows of wooden barracks, mess halls, workshops, and open yards. But what truly set them apart wasn't the design, it was the purpose. Unlike the brutal camps run by Axis powers in Europe or Asia, these American sites were built not to destroy morale, but to maintain control through structure and respect. The system was simple yet smart. Prisoners who were fed, busy, and treated decently caused fewer problems, needed fewer guards, and might one day return home with changed view of America. Each camp functioned like a small town. There were libraries with English and German books, infirmaries with clean beds and running water, and workshops where prisoners repaired uniforms or tools. Some camps even had orchestras and small theater groups to keep spirits occupied. To outsiders, it might look like unnecessary generosity, but for U.S. planners, it was a quiet form of psychological warfare, a way to show strength without cruelty. When German women began arriving in 1944, nurses, clerks, and Luftwaffe auxiliaries, officials faced a new challenge: where to house them. Texas became the answer. Its open land and need for labor made it the perfect place to try new, safer work programs that could include women. Many were sent to large camps like Hearn or Swift, surrounded by fields and mesquite trees. The rules were simple: obey, work, and you be treated fairly. Discipline was firm, but trust was common. Assignments varied across the state. Some prisoners picked cotton under the harsh sun. Others sorted vegetables, worked in warehouses, or milked cows. The women were often sent to ranches to cook, mend clothing, or help with livestock. For them, this was hard to understand. American soldiers letting captured Germans handle horses, tools, and open spaces. But for Texas ranchers, it was just necessity. There weren't enough workers left at home. For the German women, though, it shattered everything they'd been told. The propaganda that described Americans as corrupt and heartless now clashed with real experiences of structure, fairness, and unexpected kindness. Even the meals seemed unreal. Each prisoner received about 3,200 calories a day, more than many Americans themselves. Fresh bread, meat, vegetables, potatoes, and sometimes coffee or fruit. For women who had survived on ration cards and thin soup, it felt like a new world. To the women, it felt like abundance beyond reason. Everything in America seemed to run like clockwork. From trains delivering supplies to trucks hauling laundry, the same industry that built bombers also fed and clothed its prisoners. To Lisa Latte Minart, the lesson was clear. True power wasn't just measured in weapons, but in order and organization. In her journal, she wrote, asterisk, every crate, every meal, every uniform is part of a plan. Nothing is wasted. They build everything like a machine that never sleeps. Asterisk. Soon, she would see that machine up close, not in a factory, but on the ranches, where efficiency met something she couldn't explain: the natural generosity of ordinary Americans. The morning the trucks arrived, the air was heavy with hay and dust. The low sun stretched golden lines across the fields as guards read names from a clipboard. Lisa stood tall among the group, her uniform worn but tidy. None of them knew what waited beyond the gates, only that they had been chosen for work on a nearby cattle ranch. They expected the worst: chains, harsh orders, endless hours under a burning sun. For months, stories had spread to the camp, prisoners taken away and never seen again. But when the trucks pulled up, what they saw didn't match any of those rumors. Instead of barking guards or snarling dogs, there were men in denim shirts and wide hats leaning casually against pickup trucks. Cowboys, real ones. Their leader, a tall rancher named Frank Callahan, greeted them with a friendly wave. "Morning, ladies. You all ready to work?" he called out with an easy smile. His southern drawl was so thick that the interpreter had to repeat it twice before they understood. When the women arrived at the Callahan Ranch, their disbelief deepened. There were no barbed fences, only open fields stretching the horizon, scattered with grazing cattle and horses under a wide blue sky. Frank's first order surprised them even more. "Before work, we eat," he said. The smell of bacon filled the air. Biscuits baked in iron pans, eggs sizzled beside them, and coffee brewed strong and dark. The women sat quietly around a long wooden table, unsure what to do. No guards hovered nearby. No one shouted. After breakfast came an even greater shock. Frank led them to a corral, where several horses stood ready. "You'll be learning to ride," he said, grinning. "Can't herd cattle on foot. You'll help us drive them in next week." A few women laughed nervously. Lisa whispered, "He must be joking." But he wasn't. Within minutes, ranch hands were helping each woman onto a horse, using a mix of broken German and gestures. At first, it was chaos. Skirts tangled, saddles slipped, and frightened Mars bolted, sending shouts and laughter across the corral. But the cowboys didn't mock them. They laughed kindly, steadying each rider. "Don't fight her," one said gently. "Feel the rhythm. She'll carry you if you trust her." By midday, the women were dusty, sweaty, and smiling. The fear that had lived inside them for months began to fade under the Texas sun. For the first time since capture, they stood outside the wire unguarded, surrounded by open sky. When Lisa guided her horse into a smooth trot, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. Not the kind government spoke of, but a quiet, personal freedom. The wind, the motion, the simple joy of being alive. That night, in the small bunkhouse built for workers, she wrote, "Asterisk, they trust us. It seems madness, but perhaps it's kindness in disguise. They treat us not as enemies, but as people. I do not understand this America." Asterisk, her confusion wasn't hers alone. All the women felt it. They had grown up believing strength meant control, punishment, and obedience. But here in Texas, strength looked like patience, calmness, and humor, a confidence so effortless it needed no cruelty at all. Even the way the cowboys led felt different. They didn't yell or threaten. They led by example. When a horse refused a move, they didn't reach for a whip. They waited, spoke softly, and tried again. Their authority came from patience, not fear. Lisa Lot watched in silence, try and make sense of it. If this was the country they had fought against, then everything she had been told about America had been a lie. The change in her and the others came quietly. Within days, the German women were treated less like prisoners and more like fellow workers. Their only guards were the open skies, the wind through the mesquite trees, and the steady presence of cowboys who showed them simple respect. There were no barbed fences, only invisible boundaries built on trust. Frank Callahan put it plainly: "You run, you'll die of thirst out there. You stay, you'll eat well and sleep easy. We're not your jailers. We're your neighbors till this war's done." Lisa didn't believe him at first. None of them did. But by the end of the week, the truth was clear. The supply trucks came just once every 7 days. No one counted heads. No one watched the horizon. The women could have vanished into the plains at any time, but they didn't. Why would they? Out here, they were working, laughing, learning, even living again. They patched fences, milked cows, and tossed hay bales with skill that surprised the cowboys. "Tougher than half the boys we've hired," one of them said with a grin, "and they don't complain neither." Lisa began to notice something else: the American attitude toward work. In Germany, labor had been duty. Here it was pride. The cowboys joked and challenged one another. Who could rope a calf faster? Who could fix a fence before sundown? It wasn't just toil, it was purpose. Evenings brought another surprise. Instead of being locked away, the women were invited to sit around the fire. Harmonicas and guitars filled the dusk, turning the Texas night into something peaceful, almost sacred. At first, the women sat apart, unsure, but the music reached across the silence. One night, a cowboy started humming Lily Marlene, a song every German knew. Without thinking, Lisa joined in. Others followed. English and German voices blended together in the glow of the fire, carrying the same tune under the same stars. For those few minutes, there were no enemies, just people sharing warmth and melody. When the song ended, Frank leaned back and said quietly, "War ends quicker when folks realize they were never that different." The next day, the air felt lighter. Fear and suspicion had started to fade. Anna, one of the younger women, asked to learn how to lasso. The cowboys agreed, showing her patiently how to twirl the rope. Before long, her clumsy attempts drew laughter from both sides, not mocking but joyful. Then came the day that sealed their bond. A storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds, howling wind, lightning cracking across the horizon. The cattle panicked, scattering into the rain. Without waiting for orders, the women ran for the horses. They rode hard alongside the cowboys, shouting, waving, driving the frightened herd back to safety. By the time the storm passed, they were soaked and shivering, but triumphant. Not a single cow had been lost. Frank, dripping wet and smiling, looked at them proudly. "Guess y'all ain't just city girls after all," he said. That night, the men hung a hand-painted sign above the bunkhouse door, "The German Cowgirls." Lisa stared at it, then burst into laughter, tears mixing with joy. Somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. The war, the propaganda, the hatred, all of it felt distant now. What mattered was the work, the trust, and the strange sense of dignity they found in this unexpected corner of the world. By early autumn, the Texas air began to cool, and so did the walls around their hearts. The war still burned across Europe, but here, time moved differently, marked not by bombs or orders, but by honest work, quiet laughter, and the steady hum of crickets under the wide Texas sky. For the first time since their capture, the women were allowed to send mail. Each was given a single sheet of official camp stationery and told she could write one letter home. Every page would be censored, but still, it was a rare and precious chance to reach the world they'd left behind. That night, the bunkhouse was silent, except for the soft scratching of pencils. Lisa's hand trembled as she began. "Asterisk, dearest mother, I am alive, and I must tell you something you will not believe. I am working on a farm in Texas. They call it a ranch. The people here are kind, truly kind. They give us food, so much food I can't finish it. They even let us ride horses. The men wear hats as wide as plates and drink something called Coca-Cola. They play music after work and teach us their songs." Asterisk. She paused, staring at the words. Would her mother think she'd gone mad? Everything back home said Americans starved their prisoners, beat them, made them suffer. Yet here, in this sunlit corner of Texas, she was drinking coffee every morning and learning how to make chili. She continued, "Asterisk, Mama, they trust us. We could run if we wanted, but we don't, because we are free in ways that truly matter. I never knew freedom could look like this." Asterisk. The letters were collected the next morning. Weeks later, the replies arrived, trembling with disbelief. Asterisk. "Lisa, are you sure? You must be mistaken. Perhaps you're dreaming. They would never treat prisoners so kindly." Asterisk. Her mother wasn't alone. Every woman who had written received the same kind of response. Families back in Germany, still living through bombing, shortages, and fear, couldn't imagine such stories of hamburgers, open fields, and friendly cowboys. To them, it all sounded like fantasy. Even American officers chuckled as they reviewed the mail. "You gals are writing fairy tales," one said with a grin. "Ain't nobody gonna believe you over there." But the truth was undeniable. Every day, the German prisoners saw more in America that defied everything they'd been taught. They saw in the sheer abundance. Eggs by the dozen, meat by the pound, sugar in full sacks. They saw in the endless machines, tractors roaring through fields, powered by fuel that never seemed to run out. And they saw it in the people, in a place where no one bowed, where no one ruled through fear. When Lisa asked a cowboy why he treated them with such kindness, he simply shrugged. "Ma'am, war's over for you when you get here. Ain't no use fighting ghosts." It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It was something uniquely American, a mercy that measured worth by effort, not nationality. Then came another surprise, a truckload of new arrivals. German soldiers from another camp. They stared in disbelief as they watched the women working alongside cowboys, laughing, guiding horses, free to move wherever they wished. "This can't be real," one muttered in German. But it was. For these men, seeing their female comrades treated with respect, unchained and unafraid, shattered years of propaganda. Slowly, they too began to soften. The cowboys taught them to mend fences, rope cattle, even dance by the fire. By November, the Callahan Ranch had become something unthinkable, a small island of peace in a world still at war. For Lisa, it became a quiet revelation that humanity could survive captivity, and that kindness could rise from the ashes of conflict. She didn't yet know these lessons would stay with her long after she left Texas. April 1945. The wind carried the scent of spring, rain, grass, and life returning to plains. Calves had been born. The fields were turning green again. But rumors swirled faster than the dust devils twisting across the horizon. Germany collapsing. Berlin surrounded. Hitler dead, or so some whispered. At the ranch, the women worked as usual, mending saddles, washing clothes, herding cattle. But unease hung in the air. The radio in Frank's kitchen, usually filled with country songs and baseball scores, now played only news from Europe. That afternoon, Frank stepped out of the barn, hat in one hand, newspaper in the other. His face was grave. "Ladies," he said softly, "it's over." For a long moment, no one moved. The word seemed unreal. "Over?" Lisa asked quietly. "The war," Frank said. "Germany surrendered." The world seemed to stop. Tools dropped to the dirt. Anna covered her face and wept. Lisa stood still, her thoughts empty. For years, everything, every fear, every choice had revolved around the war. Now it was gone. There was no cheering, no songs of victory, only silence and the low, distant call of cattle across the pasture. That night, they sat around the fire, faces lit by orange flames. Relief mixed with grief. Frank poured coffee for everyone. "It's done now," he said gently. "You'll all be going home soon." The word home hit harder than any headline. What did home even mean now? Their towns were rubble, their families scattered or dead. Germany no longer existed as they'd known it. Lisa stared into the fire, watching sparks drift upward. "What will we go back to?" she whispered. Frank said nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone knew there was no easy answer. In the following days, army trucks rolled in. Officers arrived to process the prisoners for repatriation. The women packed what little they had, a few clothes, letters, and keepsakes, while the cowboys stood by quietly, hats in hand, watching them prepare to leave the only place that had ever treated them as human beings. Frank found Lisa as she was folding her worn gloves into a small canvas bag. "Looks like you'll be heading home soon," he said quietly. Lisa nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan, for everything." Frank smiled, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. "Ain't nothing to thank me for. You worked hard, earned your keep. That's all any of us can do." Then, with a grin, he reached behind him and handed her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Got something for you." Inside was a brand-new Stetson hat, soft, cream-colored, and perfectly shaped. "So you don't forget Texas," he said. Lisa laughed through tears and placed it on her head, tilting it awkwardly as the brim shaded her eyes. The ranch hands clapped and cheered. "Yeehaw! The German cowgirl rides again," someone shouted. As the trucks rumbled away, the women looked back through the wooden slats. The ranch faded slowly, the barns, the windmill, the waving men in their hats. Lisa watched until it disappeared, knowing she'd never forget that view. It wasn't just a place. It was a revelation. She had come to Texas a prisoner, and was leaving as something else. Someone who had seen that dignity could grow not from rank or fear, but from mutual respect. As the truck rolled down the dusty road, she whispered, "Maybe we lost the war, but perhaps we can still win peace." Looking out at the fading horizon, she realized the greatest freedom she had discovered wasn't physical. It was moral. She had seen the quiet strength of kindness, and it had changed her forever. The journey home took months. Though the war was over, the oceans were slow, and paperwork slower still. When the ship carrying Lisa and the others finally reached Bremerhaven, winter had returned. The air was sharp, the sky gray, and Germany lay in ruins. The docks were shattered, the city crushed. Streets were reduced to rubble. As the women stepped ashore, their breath turned to white mist. It was a homecoming, but to a homeland that barely existed. Before they disembarked, American officers handed each of them a small care package. Chocolate bars, canned food, letters with instructions. The Red Cross logo on every box felt surreal. For years, they had been told Americans were greedy, cruel, and heartless. Yet now, standing in the wreckage of her country, Lisa held a Hershey bar in one hand and wore a Texas cowboy hat. The lie she had once believed crumbled completely. When she reached what was left of her hometown, the truth struck hard. Her house was gone. Her parents gone. Her village burned. But amid the ruins, she carried something the destruction could not take away, a lesson she had learned under the Texas sun. She began working as a translator for the Allied forces. Her English, filled with cowboy slang, made the soldiers smile. She called officers partner, dropped her G's, and used ain't like a native Texan. When asked how she learned, she would tell stories of the ranch, the wide skies, and the kindness of men who treated prisoners not as enemies, but as people. Many American soldiers were stunned. They had expected tales of hardship and cruelty, not stories of cattle drives, music, and Coca-Cola. In 1948, Lisa was invited to speak at a post-war women's conference in Stuttgart. The theme, Rebuilding Through Understanding. Standing before a room of German and Allied women, former enemies now sitting side by side, she began softly. I was a prisoner of war, but I never felt like one. She spoke of the cowboys who shared their meals, of Frank Callahan's quiet decency, and of the days she wore a Stetson and felt, for the first time, truly equal. I learned that freedom, she said, is not granted by nations. It's given by people, one act of kindness at a time. Her words brought tears to the crowd. When she finished, an American woman walked up and embraced her, a gesture many in the audience would never forget. A German and an American, once enemies, now sisters. Years later, Lisa immigrated to the United States. She settled in San Antonio, not far from the land where she had once worked as a POW. There, she opened a small bakery known for its blend of German pastries and Southern flavors. Apple strudel with pecan crumble, pretzel sprinkled with smoked salt. Above the counter hung a photograph. A young woman in a cowboy hat far too big for her, standing beside a tall rancher with a shy smile. Beneath it, a simple line read, From enemies to friends. When customers asked about it, she'd smile and say, That's the man who showed me what America really is. By the time Lisa passed away in 1987, she had become a local symbol of reconciliation. Former prisoners, men and women alike, visited her bakery to share memories of the strange kindness they'd once found in the unlikeliest of places. Historians later wrote that these prisoner experiences quietly helped rebuild trust between Germany and the United States. Thousands of former captives returned home carrying stories of fairness, compassion, and decency, becoming the first human bridges in a world desperate to heal. In the end, it wasn't governments or treaties that began the healing. It was simple humanity, the quiet grace of ordinary people. And on one Texas ranch in 1945, a cowboy with a gentle heart had done more to mend the wounds of war than any diplomat ever could. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields. They're found in the humble power of forgiveness. In the years that followed, Lisa's story became more than just a memory. It became a quiet reminder of what humanity can endure and rediscover, even after its darkest hour. On that Texas ranch, kindness had crossed borders that politics never could. A German prisoner and an American cowboy proved that respect, not hatred, builds the foundations of peace. Their small acts, a shared meal, a patient word, a trusted hand, echoed far beyond the dusty plains. For Lisa, the Stetson hat was never just a gift. It was a symbol of transformation. It reminded her that freedom isn't granted by victory, but by understanding, by the courage to see an enemy as human. When she baked her first loaf in San Antonio or told her story to strangers, she wasn't retelling history. She was passing on a truth the war itself couldn't destroy. Decades later, those who knew her said her kindness carried the same warmth as that Texas sun, steady, gentle, and enduring. And perhaps that is the final legacy of her journey. That peace begins not with power, but with grace, and sometimes it wears a cowboy hat,